that it's true.
They own you. They own your emotions, and you basically belong to them.
I think they would kill people, and that's on the record too.
If you can control someone's sense of reality, then the human collective mind is putty in your hands.
So, has someone been handing out space cakes? Or is this the biggest alien conspiracy of all? July the 16th, 1945, the day the atom bomb exploded. Everyone agrees this was an historic day. But some people believe it was also the day an alien conspiracy to take over our planet began. You see, apparently, this was an event which didn't just get noticed here on Earth. The shockwaves were felt across our galaxy and beyond.
Ever since the UFO phenomenon sort of exploded into public consciousness in the mid-late 1940s, people have wondered, you know, why now? Why now? And of course, the first answer people came upon was that, well, now we have the atomic bomb.
When we set off the first atomic bomb, there was such energy released that probably created ripples throughout our solar system, perhaps throughout the galaxy. And other advanced races out there kind of did a double take and went, oh my God, the kids have found the matches.
It's true that it wasn't long after the nuclear blasts in the late 1940s that the first witness reports of UFOs began.
I think it was from outer space, but friendly.
According to the theory, these UFOs were alien craft who had arrived as an advanced guard. They were soon making contact with our rulers and negotiating terms. And if the theory is to be believed, an international conspiracy then began to hide any evidence of this contact. It's a cover-up which is still in full swing, or so some believe. Meet Peter Gersten, an all-American criminal lawyer. When he's not suing people and doing all the other things lawyers do, he's taking on the US government. And that's because ever since he was a boy, Gersten's been fascinated by UFOs. Some people would just go out and buy a toy ray gun, but not Gersten. Instead, he has spent much of his career trying to prove that the American government has been hiding its extensive knowledge of aliens and alien contact.
I was the first and only attorney ever to bring any lawsuits against the U.S. government for UFO-related documents that actually made it into court.
His dogged persistence and knowledge of the American Freedom of Information laws eventually led to the release of hundreds of previously unseen documents.
I must have brought about 10 lawsuits. Even when they release documents, they've always withheld something within those documents. This affidavit is a perfect example. Half the affidavit is blacked out. If UFOs do not pose a threat, if UFOs do not represent an advanced technology, then why is this all deleted?
Why indeed? He says these documents reveal the American government's obsession with the UFO phenomenon, which began during the 1940s and 50s. They reveal the existence of government committees which were initially set up to investigate UFOs. But all along, the existence of these organisations was denied, until finally they were all closed down, one by one. Despite the fact that governments kept telling the public there was no such thing as aliens, the aliens themselves didn't seem to be getting the message. Because according to Gersten, they just kept flying their spaceships through our skies. One case which has been cited by many as proof of a vast conspiracy conveniently happened in Gersten's backyard in Phoenix, Arizona.
Unidentified flying objects over the valley. A triangular-shaped object.
What was in the sky last night?
The Phoenix lights lasted anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours, and there's never been a major investigation to determine what that was.
What is it?
I don't know.
About 10:30 at night, There were about 7 lights that had a distinct formation that just stayed over Phoenix in a triangular pattern and then left. And it's amazing to me that something can appear so brazenly over a major metropolitan area and not be fully investigated.
The story gripped the local media, but the official response was some kind of military flares.
They had a number of leftover flares on the aircraft, and each aircraft had to get rid of them because the rules prohibit the aircraft from landing with flares on board.
Gersten returned to the courtroom, but even he couldn't prize an explanation out of the authorities.
The Freedom of Information Act is totally impotent. All they have to do is a reasonable search. And they say they did a reasonable search, we couldn't find anything, and the court goes along with that.
So, is Gersten onto something, or does he just need to get out more? To really get to the bottom of what the government might be hiding, we need an insider. One who's seen some alien evidence with their own eyes.
If you're involved in something like this, who do you talk to? You can't tell your family. You can't tell your closest friend.
Now, the most convincing evidence that aliens have landed and those in power know about it would naturally be the sight of, well, an alien hanging out with the rich and powerful, being driven around in a limousine, or being photographed with celebrities. Unfortunately, the absence of anything like this means believers had to rely on something less convincing, hearsay, and there's certainly been plenty of that.
I glanced up and there were 3 flying saucers at an altitude of 350 feet.
No one disagrees that in the 1940s there were lots of unidentified flying object sightings. Even the skeptics agree there have been a lot of these sightings, but they put that down to paranoia.
What's this all about? What's everybody running from?
It's the end of everything.
What do you mean?
There was, after all, something called the Cold War going on. When the West and the Soviets confronted each other with secret weapons, spy planes, and various other military thingamajigs. The skeptics put UFO reports down to all of this. Nick Pope, for example, conducted an official British investigation into UFO claims, and let's just say he's not convinced.
Nothing so far tends to give rise to any suggestion that extraterrestrials have visited the Earth. But it's often suggested that there's a huge conspiracy here and that the government somehow covering up the truth about UFOs. Well, having headed the UFO project for 4 years, I can categorically say there's no truth in that whatsoever.
For believers, though, the more governments deny, the deeper the cover-up must be. And instead they turn to people who have claimed to have seen for themselves evidence of an alien plot. Some of these witnesses say they even saw evidence of an elaborate government cover-up. You know, things like alien craft, soldiers picking over it, and aliens. Here's someone who says he saw exactly that. Clifford Stone spent over 20 years in the American Army. For most of that time, he had a desk job, but that's not to say nothing interesting happened to him. Because according to Stone, he was drafted into a top-secret operation. Its purpose? To retrieve downed Soviet satellites.
I was involved in the activities that would recover crashes, debris thereof. Those operations were known as Project Moondust and Operation Bluefly. Those 2 projects dealt with 2 things: the recovery of objects of unknown origin or objects that survived re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere.
Most of the recoveries were routine. But then in 1969, says Stone, his team were asked to investigate something that was very weird indeed.
During that time, we got a call, and they stated that they needed us to put some people together because they had a plane or something that went down not too far from where we were at. When we got there, a person that I would later always call the colonel, he was there and he came up and he told me, he says, specialist, I need you to go ahead, take your Geiger counter. And I want you to take Geiger counter readings and call them back to us. Well, I was asking, well, what is it? And he went ahead and said, it's some type of Soviet spacecraft that crashed. Says, now, if you get there and you see anything unusual, you need to keep in mind that the Soviets put monkeys, just like we do, in their craft. And as a result of that, if you see any bodies, don't worry about it. It will be monkeys. This was nothing that I had ever seen. I knew it wasn't our craft. I knew it wasn't the Soviet craft. As soon as I got to the place where I could look down, I could see where there was a little kidney-shaped door that opened on the side, and I saw one of the creatures lying out there. I went ahead and told him I needed an officer. I needed an officer to come up there, that this wasn't right. I also said, this is no damn monkey.
Ever since he left the army, Stone says he's been trying to get the American government to admit to what he says he saw. The Defense Department, though, are still refusing to corroborate his story. Whatever the truth, he does seem to believe passionately in what he's saying. But it's worth remembering that people claim to have seen an awful lot of strange things. Take, for example, the family in Slovakia in 1990 who claimed to have been visited by the Virgin Mary. Or the hundreds of worshippers at a Hindu temple in the UK who swore they saw a statue drinking milk. And in Michigan, dozens of folks said they'd seen weird demonic children with melons for heads. Belief. It's a funny thing. But if by some chance Clifford Stone is telling the truth, it raises an obvious question. Why, oh why, would governments hide their encounters with aliens? What have they got to gain? Some people think the answer lies in technology, and we're not talking ringtones. Richard Dolan is a writer who has been investigating government conspiracies for over 10 years.
Whether you believe that the UFOs are ours or alien, there's certainly something that's showing non-fossil fuel related transport. You know, I've spoken to hundreds of people who said, yeah, this object stopped over my head and took off like a bullet, silently. Well, this is not 100-octane petroleum here. This is something far beyond. So the question is, what is it?
So if alien craft are using some advanced technology we don't know about, what might it be? We were hoping you'd ask. Tom Vallone is one of a small band of scientists working on various theories that could explain how alien craft travel, if indeed they do, intergalactically.
See flying saucers travel thousands of miles in seconds.
Vallone believes aliens can travel light years through space because they've come up with a source of energy that never runs out. Which means it's a lot cheaper and more reliable than the stuff you'd find on your local forecourt. Cool.
We couldn't possibly imagine that UFOs would be burning rocket fuel. You can't even get to Mars today with rocket fuel. So we have to accept the fact that if there are vehicles that can travel interplanetary and perhaps interstellar, they have to use an onboard fuel source that is converting ambient energy or have such a concentrated form of energy that it can survive over light years of travel.
Right. And how might they do that?
The current UFO research points to many different technologies that can be used for free energy and what we call anti-gravity propulsion.
Solving the problem of anti-gravity has flummoxed the greatest minds in physics, but Tom has spent many months locked in his garden shed trying to figure it out. He's even built a little replica UFO.
One UFO contactee reported a disc the size of the UFO that had magnets on the outer edge. And so here we actually have a disc that has magnets on the outer edge that perhaps may be powered by some means that involve permanent magnets or some arrangement of permanent magnets.
According to Vallone, the separate halves of UFOs might contra-rotate to create energy that can be harnessed to power the spaceship. The beauty of this energy is that it comes out of nowhere. You don't need to do anything so last century as actually burn fuel. In fact, it's like you're creating it out of thin air. You can see why Tom is still puzzling over it, can't you? According to the alien conspiracy theory, when the extraterrestrials brought this energy to Earth, a lot of very powerful humans got very annoyed. Some people, like journalist Jim Mars, think those in power didn't want such limitless energy to become widely available. The spoil sports. Please don't take my sunshine away.
Think of the ramifications. If a whole new energy technology was to come along that would just overnight replace gas and oil. The oil industry would collapse, the Middle East would collapse, the whole car industry would collapse. You know, I mean, it would be a severe upheaval in our society.
In a world economy dominated by oil, Mars says this new kind of new energy would undermine powerful business interests.
See, these folks, they don't care if we know there's aliens out there. What they care about is if we know there's aliens, then we know there's alternative technologies, and this could upset their monopolies.
But Mars goes even further. He says the government and the powers that be started covering all this up even before the 1940s.
We're on the way to Aurora, Texas, where legend has it that a spaceship crashed in 1897. This is the Texas Historical Commission, the state marker that I was telling you about. And it's the oldest known graves here, early 1860s. This site's also well known because of the legend that a spaceship crashed nearby in 1897, and the pilot killed in the crash was buried here. And the only caveat, of course, is the word legend. Okay, right up here under this oak tree is where the grave site is, but there's no marker, so I guess I'm one of the last people in the world to know precisely where the grave is. And now that you know, I guess you'll have to be killed. It was right here. Someone stole the marker back in 1973. We figured the government did it. And I have reason to believe that's true because not too long back I met a woman who grew up around here by this cemetery, and she said that she had encountered federal officers in this cemetery, and I said, oh yeah, that was probably back in 73, and she said, no, this is back in the 50s when I was a little girl.
Jim's experience in Texas led him, he says, to compare notes with others across America, and he began to detect a pattern to the cover-ups. Ah, you were wondering how long it would take to get to the Men in Black? Well, here they come.
If someone has a UFO-connected experience, then sometimes they are visited by strange men in black suits who, number one, ask them, what exactly did you experience? And number two, tell them, if you know what's good for you, you won't talk about this.
Now, let's just get this story right. According to Mars and many others, there's been a worldwide conspiracy to cover up contact with aliens because governments don't want to reveal the technology they learned from these extraterrestrials. But does that make any sense? Wouldn't the governments or the oil companies just license this advanced technology and sell it? And anyway, if they wanted to cover up contact with aliens, you'd think they'd remember to take away that sign. But since all the people involved are long dead, there's no way we can ever know for sure if it really happened. What we really need to do is meet one of these men in black for ourselves. Well, guess what? we found someone who said he worked for a top-secret military organisation. And his job was to run part of the official cover-up. Funnily enough, he wanted to remain anonymous.
I was trained by the Central Intelligence Agency and the Defense Intelligence Agency. During my DIA career, I investigated unidentified flying object sightings throughout the southwestern part of the United States. We did conduct counterintelligence operations against people that were close to obtaining the truth about classified programs. Some might call the operations disinformation, but whatever you call it, it was a legitimate form of putting the wrong people away from the classified programs.
This alleged secret agent wouldn't tell us exactly why the military wanted to hide their contact with aliens, although there were dark hints of a military-alien alliance, and he was happy to admit he'd met many an alien in his time.
They're about 4 foot, and they have the classical large eyes. They come from a planet with apparently a very bright sun, so they have double eyelids, have no ears per se, just have an opening on each side of their head, same as nose, mouth, no teeth, simple internal organs, heart and lungs, basically the same organ, simple digestive system. I'm not going to discuss that. There's a lot of information I wish I didn't know.
So there you go, a secret agent who positively wanted to be interviewed. He refused to give us any evidence to back up his claims, and we couldn't find any either. But if he did what he says he did, how does he sleep at night?
I don't have any problem with my conscience, no. Everything I did in a government service, the disinformation in this area, was all legitimate. It's sanctioned operations that I was told to do. I did my job, and I did it well.
These guys, they're unofficial. They don't exist within the official framework of our society. These agents charged with studying UFO phenomena and so forth. They're outside.
Okay. Maybe Agent X is telling the truth, and he's a man in black. If so, we've stumbled on a scoop. So when did the cover-up begin? Maybe aliens didn't first land in the 1940s, or even in the 1890s. Because maybe, just maybe, aliens have been here for a long time, and when we say a long time, we mean a very long time. They've been running the world since the year dot, and they've kept it very quiet indeed.
People want to laugh and say it's impossible. Well, please be my guest, I don't care. But if you're interested in what's happening in the world, this is a phenomenon that needs looking at, because there's something to look at.
So, we've had top-secret government committees investigating the presence of UFOs in our skies. We've had secret military operations to retrieve downed spaceships and their alien pilots. We've had sinister government agents terrorizing the public. But in terms of a conspiracy, this is just the tip of the alien iceberg.
I woke up, and mere inches in front of my face, there he was. And I was really freaked out.
This is a very rare opportunity we're looking at. Implants are rare.
Because according to some, the aliens have not only landed, they're actually running the world. What? Yes. Here's a man who believes it. David Icke. Icke regularly speaks to packed-out audiences, spooking them out with the full implications of his theory.
The power that these guys I'm going to talk about in detail today use to manipulate, control, and slaughter many of us, increasingly so, is only the power we give away every single day.
He hasn't always been a full-time conspiracy theorist. In fact, he started as a soccer player and sports commentator on the BBC.
Kenny Dalglish of Liverpool and Scotland.
But all along, something was troubling him.
When I was a kid, I had this feeling, I couldn't put words to it, I had this feeling I had something to do. And when I started being quite good at football and went into professional football, I thought that must be what it is. But there was something missing. I couldn't put words to it. I felt unfulfilled.
Ike looked at the world and there was something wrong with it. At first he couldn't work out what it was, but something under the surface was amiss. International poverty? Global warming? The capitalist system? No, something deeper still. He became convinced that everything that was wrong with the world could be explained by one overarching idea: that a small, ruthless elite had taken control of our planet. It's claimed it is made up of a highly secretive group of families who exercise absolute control over world politics and economics. Its name? The Illuminati.
Well, the name Illuminati comes from the phrase the illuminated ones, which is extremely appropriate because they are illuminated into knowledge that they keep from the rest of the people.
Ike was convinced that these families were no ordinary power-crazed tyrannical elite. Oh no. There was just one small detail which distinguished them from the rest of us.
What I've done is ask the next question, which is, where did the Illuminati come from, and who controls them? And you go back into thousands of years BC, and you start to pick up another common theme, which is of interbreeding between humans and a non-human race.
I am from another planet, outside your galaxy.
I'm sorry, I just don't understand.
Ike claims thousands of years ago aliens arrived on Earth and probably interbred with the leading families of ancient primitive societies, creating alien-human hybrids. These hybrids and their descendants control the planet and everything on it. And if that wasn't scary enough, Ike says that they live in disguise amongst us, they live for hundreds of years, and they eat human flesh. Nobody's perfect. And in case you've been wondering, their sacred symbol is the pyramid, which is why, according to Ike, it's no accident that pyramid-shaped buildings are found from Mexico and Peru to Egypt and ancient Babylon. And how do we know about these guys? Well, according to Ike, this most top secret of secret societies uses special codes to communicate, using their own sacred images of the pyramid.
On the dollar bill, you have an ancient Illuminati symbol, which symbolizes perfectly what I'm talking about. It's the pyramid structure, and at the top you've got the all-seeing eye, the capstone of the pyramid, the illuminated ones, illuminated into knowledge they keep from the rest of the population.
Now, quite why the most secretive beings on the planet use the least secretive place to communicate, no one seems to know. Such details haven't stopped David Icke selling thousands of books, although there has been criticism of his use of the word Illuminati. The same term was used in the past by right-wing extremists to describe a worldwide conspiracy run by Marxists, Freemasons and Jews, and some have claimed that he is just tapping into old extreme paranoias. So who are the alien-human hybrids, and how would we spot one if we saw it? Well, apparently they include George Bush, Tony Blair and even the Queen of England. And we thought she was just German. Apparently they are all descendants of the original alien hybrids.
What you have, in effect, is the Illuminati families being the genetic representatives on this planet of these serpent gods.
Serpents? Yes, the aliens who came down to Earth long, long ago didn't look like the Queen of England. In fact, they were serpent, lizardy sorts. And even when they interbred, the old reptile bit just wouldn't disappear.
Well, I think the answer to why reptiles is why not. It's just a form through which people express themselves, or entities, consciousness expresses themselves.
The Illuminati cover up their reptilian nature with a human disguise. But occasionally, though, the effort of hiding their slithery selves becomes too much, and the mask drops.
Let me see you as you really are.
People find it difficult to perceive of a two-legged reptilian entity with what we would call an intelligent mind. But I have talked to hundreds and hundreds of people all over the world. I've been to more than 40 countries researching this, who have told me the same basic recurring story of seeing people, often in positions of power, but not always, change from a human into a reptilian form and then go back again. Sometimes it's for a few seconds, sometimes it's for longer.
Icke's theory has turned him into a superstar in the conspiracy world. But some more mainstream ufologists are skeptical about his theories.
Having worked in the fields of public relations and communication, I'm not sure that I'm going to win friends and influence people by calling the Queen Mother of England a 200-year-old reptilian cannibal.
Whatever the truth, there's no doubt that Icke has tapped into something which people have often felt, the sense that their lives and their society are not under their control. But it's arguable whether those fears are calmed by imagining the world is run by lizards. Icke's theory that lizards are in control has had one notable effect. Whereas 20 or 30 years ago, alien sightings tended to be all about little green men, alien sighting stories have now begun to change. Now lizard sightings are all the rage. Mona Kempka, for example, is a fan of Icke. She's read all his books. And rather coincidentally, she has also seen lizards. They come visiting.
My name is Mona Kempka. I'm 55 years old. I've been a psychiatric nurse for 30 years. I've lived alone for the last 10 years.
12 years ago, Mona had her first reptilian experience.
In 1994, a reptoid appeared in my living room. 6'3", thin waist, giant muscular legs. This being could kill 5 men with a swat. I was asleep because I worked the night shift. And I woke up, and mere inches in front of my face, there he was. And I was really freaked out. I stood up in my bed screaming. He appeared to me for 6 seconds, and I was standing up in my bed, screaming, then he vanished. And I just sat down in my bed, and I started laughing hysterically. It wasn't because I thought it was funny, I was just hysterical. I didn't know who to call. I thought even my own mother would not believe this, you know.
So what's going on? Has Mona seen a reptoid alien, or does she just think she has? Or did the books she read by Icke play their part?
I mean, I don't believe everything I read. I take it all in and try to make my own decisions. But David Icke's on the money. And I don't even know David Icke. I'm just telling you, I'm glad this man is gaining momentum in this country.
What would help convince the rest of us would be if Mona, or anyone, had found some physical evidence, say a bit of old lizard skin lying around. Sadly, there was none. But that doesn't mean to say that there isn't any physical evidence of aliens and their dastardly attempts to control the world. Well, not if you believe this man. He says he's found it.
You cannot make claims of some strange entity in the midst of the night, or in broad daylight in some cases, actually came and abducted you and did various things and so on, without there being physical evidence of those claims.
Daryl Sims' day job is as a private investigator in Texas. But he has another string to his bow. He spent the last few years working with people he says have been implanted with alien probes. Just a normal, everyday sort of guy, then.
Well, first of all, they're varied and very different. We found them in the eye, we found them in the feet, we found them as large as a walnut, an inch big, next to the heart of an abductee. I found them in all types of places, deep inside the brain, some of them as big as into your thumb, and then disappear within a year. What they are, that's a good question. What they're for, that's a good question as well.
Sims says he has extracted many of these implants and even agreed to show us a film of him doing exactly that.
What you're actually seeing here is Patricia under hypnotic anesthesia. She has been given a series of suggestions. Each time she will see her move and relax even greater. She's getting ready for the surgical intervention that will take place, where the surgery will be done on her foot. Here they're making this incision. This is a very rare opportunity we're looking at. Implants are rare. The surgery has taken over an hour. They can't find the object that they found so easily on X-ray. Here he is bringing the object out in a T-shaped formation. What they found in the keratin was wrapped around these objects, and it was very hard, very durable. It showed no signs of inflammatory response. In other words, this object was not treated by the body of Patricia, as an example, in any way as if it were a foreign object.
Now, Daryl Sims has no medical background whatsoever, but he claims that the object that was removed from Patricia's body was designed to control her mind. Quite why they put it in her foot, though, is a whole different matter. But anyway, over to you, Daryl.
My thinking is that the side effects of these objects, it seems to us, based on preliminary findings, is that levels of serotonin, dopamine, neurotransmitters, in effect, have been altered in some of these abductees. Now, any neuropsychologist or neurophysiologist can tell you in a New York minute that anybody that controls your serotonin, dopamine, or potassium, anybody controls these neurotransmitters, especially serotonin and dopamine, they own you. They own your emotions, and you basically belong to them.
Daryl didn't allow us to do any tests on the little implant, so we can't say for sure what it was. And why a secretive alien could have been so easily outwitted by a Texan private investigator is anybody's guess. What we do know is that Daryl isn't entirely objective.
I became aware of the alien entity in 1952 at age 3.5 in an abduction scenario. And then what really threw me into high gear into full-time investigations in this phenomena is my son got abducted at age 6. Then at that point, for me, I could live with my problems with the abductions. But when you come after my children, now it's personal.
Alien lizard gods feeding off our own mistrust and fear. Alien implants that control our minds. Powerful alien-human hybrid families that run our world. Blimey. But one question keeps nagging. If some people are seeing aliens, why aren't we all? Perhaps the answer, unnervingly, lies in modern science.
People are starting to realise that the world is not just a little bit different to what they thought it was. It's actually nothing like they thought it was.
We've come a long way in our understanding of the UFO phenomena, but we still don't have a definitive answer. In the 50s, the big question was, do they come from Mars or do they come from Venus? By the 90s and today, we're even more sophisticated, and the question today becomes, do they come from another dimension?
Most skeptical, rational people will never believe that aliens control us and our planet without some conclusive evidence. But what if it was impossible to come up with evidence? Because the way we see the world is itself flawed.
People ask me, understandably, if these reptilian and other entities exist, why don't we see them? Well, it's to do with frequency. For instance, if I turn this radio on, I can get a station. If I move the dial, suddenly I've got another radio station. Now, the one I've just moved from hasn't ceased to exist, ceased to broadcast. It's continuing to broadcast, but I'm not tuning into it anymore. And so what we are in this so-called physical reality is we're like radio sets that are tuned into a particular reality. These reptilian entities and others appear to have the knowledge of how to move between dimensions.
We are invisible, Adam Penner. You cannot see us.
That's very simply what's going on. It's not some great mystery. It's actually very, very simple.
According to David Icke, the aliens have mastered some new technology which allows them to move from our visible world to mysterious, invisible dimensions. Convenient. Oh yes. But why stop there? It's equally possible to claim that a whole host of weird stuff is hiding out in hidden dimensions. Ghosts, werewolves, Elvis, and they'd all be impossible to disprove. Surely this must rank as the weirdest alien cover-up theory of all. Well, not quite. Nick Bostrom is Professor of Philosophy at Oxford University, which means he's been doing an awful lot of thinking, the brain box that he is.
We know a lot about what's before our noses, but the big picture, people think they know, but they really don't. They just make it up.
And Bostrom has been making up some cool theories of his own, and one of them's about aliens and computers. Now, 40 years ago, Earth computers looked like this. Today, they look like this. A tiny laptop now has more power than the biggest computers used to have. And our computers keep getting more powerful and quicker. Bostrom thinks, though, that all this is Stone Age compared to what alien computers can do. In fact, their computers might be so advanced that he thinks we might all be living in them. Just like the Matrix.
So one of the things that a technologically mature civilization would have is enormous amounts of computing power. By using a millionth of its computing power for only 1 second, they could create a simulation of all human minds that have ever lived.
And according to Bostrom, maybe virtual reality simulations would be so convincing that we might actually be living in one. So could we all be trapped in an alien PlayStation?
We are almost certainly living in a computer simulation, meaning that all this world that we see around us, everything we experience and everything we do, takes place in a virtual simulated reality that is implemented and running on a computer built by some technologically extremely advanced civilization.
I have come to feel that we live in a kind of matrix-like world. The question is, how far does this simulation go?
I don't trust anything in this reality. I think it's an illusion. It's a holographic reality. It's the product of somebody's technology or something's technology. So anything is possible.
So there we go. For a century or more, people worried that aliens might leave their own planet and come and conquer ours. This fear spawned a series of elaborate conspiracy theories, some involving the military, some involving a government cover-up. It was even argued that the aliens had bred with humans and sent secret messages to each other. Now it turns out the effort of investigating all those conspiracies has been a total waste of time. For planet Earth and everything on it, and indeed everything in the whole of our reality, could be just a product of an alien computer game. They didn't need to travel here to take us over. They got us to travel to them. So smile, because somewhere in another galaxy, something is watching you.
hinge everything around the word sapper, right? A sapper is a person who paves the way for others. They're a person who blazes the trail.
You get the mission prepared, you get your equipment prepared, and your soldiers prepared in a short amount of time, and you get the mission accomplished. You never quit.
Sapper is the finest engineer that America's Army has to produce. They essentially are the best of the best.
A sapper is actually a state of mind.
The spirit of this organization falls on the general sapper and the typical sapper who goes out there every single day and clears the roadways for our task force.
Sappers are the best, man. I mean, we blow up and we keep driving on.
Oh, Dark 30, traditional time for some of the tougher aspects of military training. Take a Zodiac F-470, which lists at 322 pounds, toss in 10 rucksacks at 35 pounds apiece, a couple of 10-gallon water containers, and you've got Boat PT. Welcome to the Waterborne Operations segment of the Sapper Leaders Course at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Get it off your head. Get it up.
Start with a few exercises with the boat, then set off on a 1.5-mile race carrying the boat. Of course, if you get tired, you can rest.
It's not social hour, Sapper. One. Flutter kick. You do flutter kick.
1, 2. Maybe even frolic in the water as dawn begins to break.
4.
At the end, you carry your instructors triumphantly across the finish line. Or not so triumphantly.
Somebody may want to relieve that guy in the back. Obviously, he's close to
Finish it all off with some cool-down exercises.
In this documentary, you will see miraculous UFO footage that has been authenticated by top UFO.
The documentary featured an extensive summary of the footage, the canisters containing the footage, an expert analysis from the likes of Stanton Friedman. One film expert noted in the documentary that the footage came in an old Soviet canister that had information labeled on it that was consistent with info written directly on the film reel. The numbers on the film's header matched the canisters they came. The header of the film had the crest of the KGB on it, and the term for top secret is shown in the first few seconds of this footage and image to the right. Having real-looking alien footage is one thing, but including the original film reel canisters means you are extremely close to proving 100% authenticity. This is something that has traditionally lacked in other more popular alien videos such as the widely known Alien Autopsy or the Alien Interview videos. Several KGB documents. In the documentary, several KGB documents are produced to prove the film is authentic, along with credible testimony from a former Soviet KGB operative who claims to know about the event. At first everyone believed that those debris were part of some novelty aircraft manufactured in the United States or England, said Pavel Klimchenkov, a former KGB operative, but having done some measurements material analysis, we came to the conclusion that none of the domestic or foreign manufacturers known to us could have produced this apparatus, at least not in the conditions existing on this planet. Along with Pavel's testimony, authentic KGB top-secret documents were obtained by the filmmakers, allegedly costing them $10,000. The documents described in detail a crash site recovery operation of a disc-shaped object and organic remains. Based on the credible testimony, KGB documents, expert film analysis and the general good feeling one gets when watching this interesting crash site video, it is safe to assume that this film indeed may be authentic. What about the autopsy? This footage will be posted in our second-part article along with thoughts and analysis, actors, training exercises, skepticism. Some have put forth the argument that an American production crew filmed the footage in March 1998. These claims are put forth on websites claiming to know the truth about this footage. To date they have failed to show even one current photo of any of the soldiers in the film, nor any statements from the actors that they were indeed only actors in this film. This should be easy to obtain if the footage was recently filmed. Some have put forth the argument that an American production crew filmed the footage in March 1998. These claims are put forth on websites claiming to know the truth about this footage. To date they have failed to show even one current photo of any of the soldiers in the film nor any statements from the actors that they were indeed only actors in this film. This should be easy to obtain if the footage was recently filmed. Another theory suggests the film was a training exercise. Yet no one has produced witnesses verifying this claim. One skeptical viewpoint suggests that the object's thickness is far too small to support any would-be alien pilot. The craft's outer edge as seen on the image is only 12 to 36 inches. However, it is not necessarily indicative of the overall thickness of the craft. The image was taken from the only part in the video sequence where the craft's edge is visible, and since the camera never goes behind, there is no way to tell how much depth the craft may have on the other side. Additionally, if you consider the side facing us may actually be the bottom, we can easily see that this craft can easily fit the traditional flying saucer shape as demonstrated by the below images. In this documentary they claim that, since they only were able to acquire 4 canisters of film, more film footage of this incident is available, such as the entire digging, cleanup, and inside the craft investigation. To this date, almost a decade after it went public, no other videos have surfaced. A UFO crash site allegedly filmed by the Russian KGB in March of 1969 in the Sverdlovsk region of Russia. The footage was later obtained by documentary filmmakers who then published the movie, The Secret KGB UFO Files. A film expert noted in the documentary that the film came in an old Soviet film can and the numbers on the film's header matched the cans they came in. The header of the film has the crest of the KGB on it and the term for top secret. An autopsy of the alleged pilot of the UFO is seen in the documentary film. Soviet doctors examined the burnt torso of the entity and it is revealed that the 3 doctors died 1 week later, all from cerebral hemorrhages. Death certificates are presented as proof. Several KGB documents are produced to prove the film is authentic. Some have put forth the argument that an American production crew filmed the footage in March 1998. These claims are put forth on websites claiming to know the truth about this footage. To date they have failed to show even one current photo of any of the soldiers in the film nor any statements from the actors that they were indeed only actors in this film. This should be easy to obtain if the footage was recently filmed. Another theory suggests the film was a training exercise. Yet no one has produced witnesses verifying this claim. UFO aliens may have helped build pyramids of Giza, says Cairo University archaeologist. Head of the Cairo University Archaeology Department, Dr. Ayla Shaheen in December 2010 had told an audience that there might be truth to the theory that aliens helped the ancient Egyptians build the oldest of pyramids, the pyramids of Giza. On being further questioned by Mr. Marek Nowak, a delegate from Poland, as to whether the pyramid might still contain alien technology or even a UFO with its structure, Dr. Shaheen was vague and replied, "I cannot confirm or deny this, but there is something inside the pyramid that is not of this world." Delegates to the conference on ancient Egyptian architecture were left shocked. However, Dr. Shaheen had refused to comment further or elaborate on his UFO and alien-related statements. Down below is 90's The Secret KGB UFO Files documentary, that deals with the fact that Russian had already discovered the tomb of alien humanoid in Egypt and something is beneath the pyramid. The Secret KGB UFO Files documentary interestingly supporting the head of the Cairo University Archaeology Department, Dr. Ayla Shaheen, claim as well. Actually, ancient Egyptian writings very often talk of beings from the sky opening and bright lights coming down to teach them technology and give them wisdom. Many pictures and symbols resemble UFOs and aliens. Possibly aliens built the Great Pyramid. And these solid long-lasting construction techniques were adopted by the Egyptians. Ancient Egyptian legends tell of Tep-Zepi, or the first time. This is described as an age when sky gods came down to earth and raised the land from mud and water. They supposedly flew through the air in flying boats and brought laws and wisdom to man through a royal line of pharaohs. And of course, this was all thrown out the window when Christianity came along. Keep in mind that the gods were the one and only religion that there was. No other conflicting beliefs? Why? Well, because it was fact. not faith. The modern church would have you believe it's just a myth. But you have to ask yourself, on the edge of Occam razor, what truly indeed is more likely? There has always been the question. How did the Egyptians feed and care for the 100,000 slaves that it would have taken to build the ancient structures like that of the pyramids in Egypt? 1 minute it is a very backwards country, and almost overnight a highly advanced and technological culture sprung into existence. We now have the answer to that very question and evidence that the Egyptians had help, extraterrestrial help at that, thanks to Russia, the KGB, and a top-secret project called Project ISIS. Astrophysicist, neurologist and science advisor in Advanced Propulsion System gained access to the files of Project ISIS. This was a top-secret project brought about by KGB concerning the discovery of the Tomb of the Visitor in 1961. Up until Sci-Fi purchased this exclusive footage from an agent of the Russian Mafia, it had never been seen outside the top-secret facilities of the KGB. Sci-Fi showed it one time on television, and as it stands today, no evidence of this film or the project is available. Except what we have copies of here given to us by a client that had taped the original show. This video is a powerful documentary with actual footage filmed by the KGB and verified by specialists in the field. Authentic film footage. If we can somehow bring attention back on Project ISIS and prove it out, it will change the history of the beginning of the civilization of man. During the Cold War, Nikita Khrushchev was determined to show the world that communism was superior over the democracy. As he realized that it would be too costly to compete with the US in the space race, Khrushchev chose to go the other route. Having over 300,000 agents in the secret police and espionage organizations, he focused most of this resource on alternative science, such as paranormal phenomena, psychometric weapons, biogenerators and mind-altering machines. 1920s, during the Stalinist regime, a dark room was created where the KGB conducted psychotronic weapons research on prisoners sentenced to die and political dissidents. After 1936, these files were transferred to the secret archives of the KGB, continuing on with their paranormal research. Khrushchev achieved great success with his biogenerators and machines to alter human minds, which worried, naturally, the United States, knowing that the Soviet Union was there to conquer and overthrow. Russia, being that its borders surrounded the largest landmass of the world, had the largest amount of UFO sightings. If they could capture one of these flying objects and reverse engineer it, they could have the greatest advanced aeronautical designs. They got lucky in January 1986 when a spacecraft crashed in Dalgorsk but remained intact. The craft was back-engineered and the process was quite successful. But to achieve the most superior advancement in global domination, they went in search for something that was only a rumor or legend. The Chamber of Knowledge in Egypt. If the legends were true, storehouse of knowledge left behind by ancient visitors from outer space was concealed in the Great Pyramid. A team of archaeologists were composed of Egyptologists from the Russian Soviet Academy of Science, was sent to Egypt. The fearing that the CIA would learn of this expedition, the Kremlin operated with complete secrecy. By the late 1950s, Egypt accounted for 43% of all the Soviet aid for Third World nations. When they started the ISIS project, the Soviet military personnel in Egypt was estimated over 20,000. The heavy military presence was used to disguise the efforts of the mission scientists headquartered in Cairo. They would operate under the guise of Arab peasants or Russian officers. To speed things up, in 1959 the KGB recruited professional informationalists to wiretap Egyptian officials. This paid off in July 24, 1960, when a conversation was recorded that would then change myth into reality. The official had been given a call that two Bedouin had stumbled upon the Tomb of the Visitor. The Bedouin were in a hospital and kept repeating, "The Visitor God." At this moment in time, Project ISIS became top priority and all efforts were made to immediately follow up by having the Bedouin show them where they had found this tomb. SCIFI was able to purchase several documents and film footage as to the KGB documentations of their findings. Taken out of Egypt and brought to the secret facility of the KGB was this memo to high-ranking KGB official. My agents had secured the notes of one of the scientists working on the tomb of the visitor findings. Another was the inventory of contents taken from the tomb as follows. Location of finding. Undisclosed, 15 crates of relics, 1 partially mummified body, 1 stone sarcophagus, 8 hieroglyphic samples. Old report from a project scientist that was one of the first to enter the tomb. During the inspection of the wall segment we noted that a strange magnet-repulsive force seemed to be emanating from the rock. We were unable to find any scientific explanation. Cryptologist report. Partial decoded message on tomb wall indicating a prophecy of the return of the winged gods. The Kremlin took the cryptologist report very seriously. KGB was ordered to determine target locations, planets, stars, galaxies. They had to duplicate the stars as they would have been over Giza thousands of years ago. They finally found it, in the stars and constellation of Orion during the year 10,500 BC. Although it was possible that the builders could have been working off plans of a time before the pyramids was constructed, this was proven not to be the case. Metal and synthetic materials of tomb were determined to be of unknown origin, and the tomb was carbon dated, giving it a dating of 10,500 BC, meaning the pyramid had to have been made at 10,500 BC. Cans of film were purchased by SEIFI through the Russian mafia agent, which originally came from the maximum security archives of the KGB. These cans contain film of KGB filming the process of the tomb and sarcophagus being opened. Sci-Fi had this film analyzed before purchasing by experts in this field. Finding no evidence of fraud, SEIFI purchased cans of film. The documentary is in black and white, showing soldiers entering the tomb without gas masks. As they opened the sarcophagus, you can see toxic fumes escaping and the reaction of the soldiers as they were being affected. It also shows the mummy contained inside. The film shows the soldiers leaving the tomb fast, and then a chemical warfare specialist team comes in with protective clothing. There is talk from one that was there in the tomb, that the energy inside, during the first days of exploration, was very high. They also had a team of psychics go in and do some special readings of the tomb. It later goes on to show the KGB and Bedouin loading trucks with crates to be shipped back to Russia. According to KGB documents, researchers began to wonder if the pyramid was designed for one particular purpose. They thought it was possibly a machine, being that it was designed like a three-dimensional triangular depiction of a hemisphere. Their thoughts were there must have been a reason why it was designed for resonating with the planet. Their thoughts went to a prism, and that the pyramids have powers to alter the cosmic rays, that the pyramids are huge prisms capable of concentrating energy, capturing light from the stars, which would initiate a process which would turn the pyramid into an interstellar transmitter. The three pyramids and SPHNIX could be integral parts of an immense machine designed by alien engineers linked by a master control mechanism inside the Great Pyramids. They noted that the passageway goes to main chamber, and above the sarcophagus was a tunnelled star shaft. They reasoned that when a specific star alignment occurs, a streak of energy goes down the shaft. Scientists speculated that the radiant energy hitting the sarcophagus could initiate something similar to a cold fusion reaction. The prism structure of the pyramid would then magnify and transfer to the corresponding pyramids. A united beam of energy could erupt, creating a cosmic beacon used by alien starship for future navigation. According to ancient legends all around the world, they all have the same thing in common. The visitors were like men, but more like gods. They were giants. They traveled among the stars. They brought us the knowledge. Legends of the first emperors of China were called the Sons of Heaven and made the first pyramids of China. Mexico and Yucatan have similar legends. Starwalkers can be found throughout Egyptian texts and American folklore. The visitors are described as the giants, man/gods, giants or titans. And it seems all cultures may be traced to a single parent civilization. Could it be ET? Later on in the documentary, it shows them working on the mummy, attempting to give it a face and identity. A computer projection of the mummy was made as it laid in the sarcophagus. Experts that were there to observe the fluorescent reconstruction of the face described to Sci-Fi that if they had not been there themselves, They would not have believed what the face revealed after reconstruction. When skull and face was completed, it showed a humanoid type, large cranium, large eyes, small chin, small teeth, but not Earth humanoid, but some being that had to have been extraterrestrial. Later, using underground radar technology, the KBG found a passageway under the tomb of the visitor. Directly below was a large chamber. They believed they found the chamber of knowledge, but was afraid to open the tomb, thinking it could be a Trojan horse capable of blowing up the entire planet. They decided to seal the tomb, wipe away the location of the tomb, and close the project. It seemed, however, that all were affected by the discovery. Some had personality changes. Some disappeared entirely, others committed suicide, and others no longer could support their old religious beliefs. The first official report of sightings, that we are aware of, was by King Tut about 3,400 years ago. Sightings continued through the ages. Sightings seemed to pick up with man mastered the skies. But when we conquered the inner workings of the atom, the aliens of Orion stepped up their observation with an explosion of UFO sightings that continue up to the present. UFO abduction reports began to sweep around the world in the early 60s. A pattern was developing, with nearly all abductees reporting physical examinations, insertion of objects, and artificial inseminations. Many women abductees believed they were being impregnated to give birth to alien hybrids. In the last decade, reports such as these have risen dramatically. It may be highly likely that the genetic colonization program that started back in the ancient times has resumed. The question was asked, could they be cloning themselves by implanting their alien genes into human DNA? Are humans being transformed into an alien species through genetic engineering? The ancient Egyptians have always said that our DNA came from the heavens and that someday they would return. Did the KGB discover the truth in the chamber of knowledge about the true agenda of the Yet? And what was discovered on the wall of the tomb of the visitor prophesies that they would return. But when? Secrets cannot be contained. Not even KGB secrets. A group of scientists, computer programs, doctors, etc., shortly after the discovery of the tomb of the visitor, came together to discuss the possibilities of this discovery. They fully believed that the visitor was none other than Osiris, the alien king. Thus they gave themselves the name, the Followers, based off the followers of Horus in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. According to Egyptian beliefs, a family of gods came from the stars to Egypt. They were the ones that gave the people of Egypt the knowledge and wisdom. Later they left Earth back to their star homes, except for Osiris. He stayed and taught the followers. It was their duty to protect and keep the ancient knowledge he gave them until his return. The Egyptians were astronomers and fully understood that the stars were the map to the great god Osiris and the afterlife. And followers would secretly come together in their homes to discuss the possibility of the return of Osiris. They believed that the second coming of Osiris would herald a new age for mankind. They believed that when the tomb was discovered and the seal was broken, a signal was transmitted to the visitors. They calculated and estimated the time it would take for the electromagnetic signal to reach the constellation of Orion. They figured that they could return no earlier than April 23, 1985. With that time frame in mind, the group left Russia and took off to Egypt, never to return. The only remains left behind of their meeting with the visitors was a newspaper clippage found in the KGB archives of a group of tourists disappearing in the middle of the night in Egypt, 1985. And one home movie project with film. This film showed the group in front of the pyramid at night. It shows a light appearing in the sky, the group dropping to their knees in prayer, the light becoming brighter, and then nothingness. A daughter of parents that were part of this group was shown the home video by the SCIFI team, of which she recognized her parents and burst into tears.
Did anyone happen to see a documentary on sci-fi called Secret KGB UFO Files? I happened to catch this yesterday, and while I'm leaning to the side of skepticism, I have to admit that it was intriguing. Basically, the story goes, in the early 60s the KGB discovered a tomb at the Giza Plateau containing an UFO. Luckily there was film footage, haha. The grainy film contained footage of archaeologists dressed in KGB gear opening the tomb of what was thought to be an ancient Egyptian king. When they do, toxic smoke overcomes one of them and the other two run out. It is later learned that the body isn't human. The footage looked as if it had been produced to look old. Also included were shots of psychics levitating in the tomb. One thing that caught my attention is the archaeologist that was supposed to have been claimed by the toxic smoke was later helping move crates of evidence down some stairs. Despite the curious film footage, the documentary was very interesting and had me glued from the jump. For decades, American agencies have stockpiled information on UFOs. So did their counterparts behind the Iron Curtain. Soldiers, scientists and spies all paint a disturbing picture of the KGB's secret campaign. Is this the stunning proof that the Soviets recovered something not from this earth? When US researchers began looking into just how much the Soviet government knew about UFOs and extraterrestrial visitation, they were not surprised to learn that the Russians took the subject very seriously. What they didn't expect was evidence of ancient alien visitation, paranormal properties associated with related artifacts, and most shocking of all, of a mass abduction in 1985, among the piles of materials obtained from former Soviet spies. Some extremely puzzling and disturbing documents and film footage surfaced confirming rumors, which had been circulating for decades. In the late 1950s and 60s, the Russians became very interested in a number of unusual and newly discovered archaeological sites in Egypt by interpreting ancient symbols. One of those sites was believed to contain the remains of a life form not from Earth. Startling top-secret film footage, never before seen outside the Kremlin, confirms the Soviet mission to recover and analyze these remains. Join host Roger Moore in an exclusive investigation into one of the most compelling events of our time.
That it's true.
They own you. They own your emotions, and you basically belong to them.
I think they would kill people, and that's on the record too.
If you can control someone's sense of reality, then the human collective mind is putty in your hands.
So, has someone been handing out space cakes? Or is this the biggest alien conspiracy of all? July the 16th, 1945, the day the atom bomb exploded. Everyone agrees this was an historic day, but some people believe it was also the day an alien conspiracy to take over our planet began. You see, apparently this was an event which didn't just get noticed here on Earth. The shockwaves were felt across our galaxy and beyond.
Ever since the UFO phenomenon sort of exploded into public consciousness in the mid-late 1940s, people have wondered, why now? Why now? And of course, the first answer people came upon was that, well, now we have the atomic bomb.
When we set off the first atomic bomb, there was such energy released that probably created ripples throughout our solar system, perhaps throughout the galaxy. And other advanced races out there kind of did a double take and went, oh my God, the kids have found the matches.
It's true that it wasn't long after the nuclear blasts in the late 1940s that the first witness reports of UFOs began.
I think it was from outer space, but friendly.
According to the theory, these UFOs were alien craft who had arrived as an advanced guard. They were soon making contact with our rulers and negotiating terms. And if the theory is to be believed, An international conspiracy then began to hide any evidence of this contact. It's a and the Soviets confronted each other with secret weapons, spy planes, and various other military thingamajigs. The skeptics put UFO reports down to all of this. Nick Pope, for example, conducted an official British investigation into UFO claims, and let's just say he's not convinced.
Nothing so far tends to give rise to any suggestion that extraterrestrials have visited the Earth. But it's often suggested that there's a huge conspiracy here and that the government somehow covering up the truth about UFOs. Well, having headed the UFO project for 4 years, I can categorically say there's no truth in that whatsoever.
For believers, though, the more governments deny, the deeper the cover-up must be. And instead they turn to people who have claimed to have seen for themselves evidence of an alien plot. Some of these witnesses say they even saw evidence of an elaborate government cover-up. You know, things like alien craft, soldiers picking over it, and aliens. Here's someone who says he saw exactly that. Clifford Stone spent over 20 years in the American Army. For most of that time, he had a desk job, but that's not to say nothing interesting happened to him. Because according to Stone, he was drafted into a top-secret operation. Its purpose? To retrieve downed Soviet satellites.
I was involved in the activities that would recover crashes, debris thereof. Those operations were known as Project Moondust and Operation Bluefly. Those two projects dealt with two things: the recovery of objects of unknown origin or objects that survived re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere.
Most of the recoveries were routine. But then in 1969, says Stone, his team were asked to investigate something that was very weird indeed.
During that time, we got a call and they stated that they needed us to put some people together because they had a plane.
At night, there were about 7 lights that had a distinct formation that just stayed over Phoenix in a triangular pattern and then left. And it's amazing to me that something can appear so brazenly over a major metropolitan area and not be fully investigated.
The story gripped the local media, but the official response was some kind of military flares.
They had a number of leftover flares on the aircraft, and each aircraft had to get rid of them because the rules prohibit the aircraft from landing with flares on board.
Gersten returned to the courtroom, but even he couldn't prize an explanation out of the authorities.
The Freedom of Information Act is totally impotent. All they have to do is a reasonable search. And they say they did a reasonable search, we couldn't find anything, and the court goes along with that.
So, is Gersten onto something, or does he just need to get out more? To really get to the bottom of what the government might be hiding, we need an insider. One who's seen some alien evidence with their own eyes.
If you're involved in something like this, who do you talk to? You can't tell your family. You can't tell your closest friend.
Now, the most convincing evidence that aliens have landed and those in power know about it would naturally be the sight of, well, an alien hanging out with the rich and powerful, being driven around in a limousine, or being photographed with celebrities. Unfortunately, the absence of anything like this means believers had to rely on something less convincing: hearsay, and there's certainly been plenty of that.
I glanced up and there were 3 flying saucers at an altitude of 350 feet.
No one disagrees that in the 1940s there were lots of unidentified flying object sightings. Even the skeptics agree there have been a lot of these sightings, but they put that down to paranoia.
What's this all about? What's everybody running from? It's the end of everything. What do you mean?
There was, after all, something called the Cold War going on. When the West...
or something that went down not too far from where we were at. When we got there, a person that I would later always call the Colonel, he was there and he came up and he told me, he says, Specialist, I need you to go ahead, take your Geiger counter, and I want you to take Geiger counter readings and call them back to us. Well, I was asking, well, what is it? And he went ahead and said, it's some type of Soviet spacecraft that crashed. Says, now, if you get there and you see anything unusual, you need to keep in mind that the Soviets put monkeys, just like we do, in their craft. And as a result of that, if you see any bodies, don't worry about it. It will be monkeys. This was nothing that I had ever seen. I knew it wasn't our craft. I knew it wasn't the Soviet craft. As soon as I got to the place where I could look down, I could see where there was a little kidney-shaped door that opened on the side, and I saw one of the creatures lying out there. I went ahead and told him I needed an officer. I needed an officer to come up there, that this wasn't right. I also said, this is no damn monkey.
Ever since he left the army, Stone says he's been trying to get the American government to admit to what he says he saw. The Defense Department, though, are still refusing to corroborate his story. Whatever the truth, he does seem to believe passionately in what he's saying. But it's worth remembering that people claim to have seen an awful lot of strange things. Take, for example, the family in Slovakia in 1990 who claimed to have been visited by the Virgin Mary. Or the hundreds of worshippers at a Hindu temple in the UK who swore they saw a statue drinking milk. And in Michigan, dozens of folks said they'd seen weird demonic children with melons for heads. Belief. It's a funny thing. Cover-up, which is still in full swing. Or so some believe. Meet Peter Gersten, an all-American criminal lawyer. When he's not suing people and doing all the other things lawyers do, he's taking on the US government. And that's because ever since he was a boy, Gersten's been fascinated by UFOs. Some people would just go out and buy a toy ray gun, but not Gersten. Instead, he has spent much of his career trying to prove that the American government has been hiding its extensive knowledge of aliens and alien contact.
I was the first and only attorney ever to bring any lawsuits against the U.S. government for UFO-related documents that actually made it into court.
His dogged persistence and knowledge of the American Freedom of Information laws eventually led to the release of hundreds of previously unseen documents.
I must have brought about 10 lawsuits. Even when they release documents, they've always withheld something within those documents. This affidavit is a perfect example. Half the affidavit is blacked out. If UFOs do not pose a threat, if UFOs do not represent an advanced technology, then why is this all deleted?
Why indeed? He says these documents reveal the American government's obsession with the UFO phenomenon, which began during the 1940s and 50s. They reveal the existence of government committees which were initially set up to investigate UFOs. But all along, the existence of these organisations was denied, until finally they were all closed down, one by one. Despite the fact that governments kept telling the public there was no such thing as aliens, the aliens themselves didn't seem to be getting the message. Because according to Gersten, they just kept flying their spaceships through our skies. One case, which has been cited by many as proof of a vast conspiracy, conveniently happened in Gersten's backyard in Phoenix, Arizona.
Unidentified flying objects over the valley. A triangular-shaped object.
What was in the sky last night?
The Phoenix lights lasted anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours, and there's never been a major investigation to determine what that was.
What is it?
I don't know.
About 10:30.